The Hot Talk series is something that started a year ago, actually it was a year ago last month. So we refreshed our 1-year anniversary, which has been really exciting. And as you know, we've been pulling together a number of different topics. They've been different from month to month. The intention when we first started these, back in the day when President Rick Maniloff was in charge of the House, and now we're under the leadership of President Darrell Clay, together we talked about how to really look at the headlines around us, both locally and nationally, to develop conversations of critical importance in a way that we could civilly bring together people with different views, different ideas, to encourage not only conversation of the stage members, but also conversation with the audience. So if you haven't been to a Hot Talk before, let me just explain our format. What we'll do is the panel is going to talk for about 20 or so minutes. Karen Giffen, who is closest to me here at the podium. Karen is the founding partner, or co-founding partner of the law firm Giffen and Lewinsky, and is a long-term member here at the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. Karen is going to introduce the rest of the speakers and will serve as the de facto facilitator of this group, not that they need much facilitation. But after about 20 minutes, we're going to open it up for Q&A with the audience. Any question you have. Carrie Burns, who is our assistant bar counsel, has a microphone. She's waving it now. She will come to you. We are streaming live on Facebook. And we have been doing this each month, getting about 200 to 300 people watching it on Facebook. So lest you think that it's a small house, there is a virtual house that is happening. So when you have a question, please let Carrie get the microphone to you so that you can ask your question and be heard by all of those looking at us through the virtual world. Last but not least, I thought I would just give a 30-second explanation of why this topic today. So we have a thought leadership committee here at the Bar Association, and Karen Giffen happens to be our chair of that committee. And one of the roles of that thought leadership committee is to spend some time thinking about what the big issues of the day for us to talk about, not just in the Hot Talks context, but beyond. And so a few months ago, we identified that there was no hotter topic happening across the country than the Me Too movement. At that point, it was brand new. I don't even think we'd hit the Me Too movement when we first talked about it, but it was around all those allegations that came forward. And what happened in the course of a thought leadership committee meeting, which involved 3 of these 4 individuals and a few people that are in the audience, was a very interesting organic dialogue that showed immediately how people of smart minds, of common interests, could have completely different views on what was happening. And so we thought there could be no better way to create a Hot Talk than to try to recreate and then some the conversation that we had spontaneously in that thought leadership committee room. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Karen and say, take it away.
Thanks, Becky. As Becky said, my name is Karen Giffen, and I'm here, again, really only to serve as a nominal moderator of the panel. I really don't think it's going to be necessary to say too much more about it. And to my right is Tom Ferrer, and you'll note that he was not on the invitation that you received. Tom filled in for us at the very last minute, and we're very appreciative of that he said yes, because it is a little bit of a hot button topic, so thank you for your courage, Tom. Tom is a partner at Thompson Hine, and he is, as it was described, to be an esteemed member of the Board of Trustees of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. I almost screwed up the name. So welcome, Tom. And then we have Betsy Rader of Betsy Rader LLC, a long-term litigator in our community, and she happens to be running for Congress right now. And furthest to my right is Darrell Clay, who is president of the Bar Association right now and is also a partner at Waller Everfield. And as Becky said, this grew out of that conversation we had at the Thought Leadership Committee. One thing that's important is to not have that do that. One thing that's important to know that each of us are speaking from our own viewpoint. It does not represent, our comments do not represent the organizations that we may represent in our other lives, including law firms, the CMBA, etc. And we want to be free enough to speak frankly here, and we're hopeful that you will as well. So that leads us to our topic, this Me Too movement.
Can I add one other disclaimer?
Well, certainly.
For purposes of this discussion today, we may have some point and counterpoint. Nothing that I say or that Tom says or that anyone says should be taken as an endorsement of sexual harassment in the workplace. We are opposed to sexual harassment in all of its various shapes and forms. But once we leave that basic principle, the questions immediately become very, very complicated. What does it look like? How do we go about investigating, measuring, punishing, disciplining, and all sorts of things? Those are the types of questions that we want to touch on. So again, I am not here to rise in favor of sexual harassment. I just can't say that often enough because this will be out there on Facebook forever.
Okay, that he spoke for all of us when he said that. So the Me Too movement, I think there's an argument about when the Me Too movement started. Did it start when Donald Trump became the president or during the campaign? Did it start back when Bill Clinton struggled when he was the president? Did it start when Harvey Weinstein had a whole lot of allegations come out in the press? And I think there's a good argument about when it started, perhaps why it started. But there's no question that it is now the topic of the moment in almost all circles. And I don't know, and maybe we should start with that question just generally. Why do we think, because it's not like there wasn't sexual harassment 30 years ago or 35 years ago, why now, in terms of the groundswell of we're going to pay attention to this at this moment and we're really going to talk about it? Why do you think that is? Does anybody on the panel want to try to answer that question?
Well, I think it's really been in the national consciousness. Back when I was in law school, and Clarence Thomas was nominated for the Supreme Court. You know, for me, that's really, both as a young law student and as a young adult, that's really where the concept of sexual harassment sort of leapt into our consciousness. And I think it's been there for a good 25 or 30 years. And it ebbs and flows like many contemporary issues in society. And why it burst into the consciousness again in maybe the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 2017 is a fascinating question. Whether it's because of who the allegations were levied against, or who they were levied by, or the context in which it all occurred, it's probably a little bit of everything. But you know, my hope is that it's at least here for a long enough stay, we can have serious conversations about it, and we can try to do something about it.
Yeah, picking up on the Anita Hill point, it's interesting. I was seriously, physically, sexually harassed in a job before Anita Hill. And at that time, there was really no vocabulary for it even. And when I went to the Human Resources Department, we're actually going to see a video later from Mad Men showing a man chasing a woman around. It was literally like that. And when I went to the Human Resources Department, they basically coached me on how to set up the furniture to make that chase more difficult for my harasser. So you know, Anita Hill, I actually just watched the movie of Anita Hill the other day, and I had not realized quite how much had gone on there to suppress other witnesses, for instance, who would have backed up and supplemented what she was saying. And so at least we had a vocabulary after that, but I think what happened and why this became such a movement this past year is, and you know, I'm sorry, it gets a little political, but I do think that when women saw somebody elected to the presidency who had said the things on tape that were said about women, that it, you know, that and other events really led women to feel like we did not have a voice, we were not respected, and that we really had to you know, march and to do everything in our power to make our voices heard, because things weren't changing the way we had all perhaps thought and hoped they had. And the more this Me Too movement has gone on, I think we've only seen the tip of it. There are so many women I do plain sight employment law now, and there is still such a fear of retaliation, a legitimate fear of retaliation, that I still think you were just hearing the tip of the iceberg about how much this occurs.
Why did we have marches and protests when the president harassed a teenage intern in the White House? Why didn't we see that hue and cry in the mid-90s.
I don't know. I know I was very upset about it then. And I think, again, it'll come up in some of these videos in our discussion. I think that at that time, there was, some sense that she was a willing participant. And I think that was still a lot of, there still is a lot of education to be done about whether or not somebody can really be a willing participant when they are in a power relationship like that.
And actually, that your comments, both of your comments, made me think about, and I think this way. I think of it as a scandal involving Anita Hill, and not so much Clarence Thomas. At the time, I thought of it more as a scandal involving Monica Lewinsky, as opposed to Bill Clinton. And our language has now changed. It's now a scandal involving Harvey Weinstein, and frankly, I really don't know many of the names of his kids. We have a tendency now to speak in terms of who's being accused as opposed to the accuser. And I still don't know what the answer to the question is, why now, but it is clearly now. So that then leads to an issue of, so it's out there, we know that Clarence Thomas was obviously a member of the legal community, and there was an accusation in 1991 that involved him. Currently, there's a Ninth Circuit judge named Kozinski that has hit the press, but there hasn't been.
I think he's now a former Ninth Circuit.
Has he stepped down?
He stepped down.
So, but other than a very few exceptions, there hasn't been a lot of discussion in the media about lawyers and sexual harassment. And I really don't think there's a lot of talk about it in the legal community either, even in Cleveland or in Ohio. First, do people agree with that statement? And why would it be so that the legal profession would be different, maybe, than others?
Well, there's certainly plenty of talk about it, but it tends to be client-related talk as opposed to internal focus on law firms. I think you're seeing some conversation about it. There was recently a big editorial written by a brand new associate board at law.com. And their first editorial was lengthy about this is what sexual harassment is, this is what it looks like, and making a call for understanding the power dynamics and the power structures of law firms that we all recognize continue to be dominated by guys like me, white men. Right? They're in the positions of control. They have the large books of business, and the question is this type of conduct overlooked because so-and-so is a huge rainmaker? Does that make all the difference? Will he be excused because, there's a $3 million book of business under his control?
I think the answer is yes to your question. Other ideas? My sense is,
I guess that one of the things I wonder about is, do we have a feel for whether it's more or less prevalent in the legal profession than in the business world in general? And if I were guessing, and maybe just hoping, it's we as a profession are more aware and maybe better at acting appropriately than in other professions. There's not a lot of press about the steel industry or those kinds of things, but I do. One of the things that I'm wondering about your first question is why now? I'm a little surprised about it because just in my perception, I think we are better at it than we used to. We're certainly by no means perfect, but I think that we've, I can tell you in the firms I've worked in over the years, the attention to it and the respect for the problems associated with it has escalated dramatically over time. Needs more, obviously, but I hope we're still better than other industries.
I've been practicing law for 25 years, and I can count on less than this number of hands the number of times that a firm that I've worked at has required me to attend sexual harassment training or gender sensitivity training or any of the myriad types of seminars that we develop in-house and administer for our clients.
I'll say that personally, I never ran into a sexual harassment problem in the law firm that I worked in. But I will also say that in my various roles I've had in my life, I've known women who were sexually harassed in law firms. And again, I think one of the reasons why you may be less likely to hear about it when it does happen is lawyers, as any litigator knows, people think litigators sue all the time, but in fact, I think litigators are the last people who want to sue because they know what's involved. And I think, similarly for female lawyers, I think they are all too aware of the challenges in reporting and having it addressed without retaliation. And if they would sue, you sue a law firm, you have a whole law firm on the other side, very well resourced. It may be difficult to find somebody who wants to represent you against another law firm where their colleagues are. And so it may be, and I don't know if there are any studies, it may be that there's just actually not as much sexual harassment in law firms. But I think on the other hand, I can see where there are a lot of solid reasons why women would either just exit, find another job, put up with it, do various other things to cope with it rather than bring a formal complaint or a lawsuit.
I have a tendency to think we're not better than other professions, even though we know better. But the studies do suggest that at least as of the end of the last decade, that only 30% of sexual harassment claims were ever asserted by anybody. And so I think it is right that we're talking about tip of the iceberg. But I like the concept, and I like the question, how often does it happen in the legal field? Because it gets to some poll questions we're about to do. So let's run the video, and then we can do some poll questions.
File. It didn't have its own valid press with the families in the lawsuit. But I'm just going to organize this tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Oh,
You're very sweet.
all right. If you're done, then you're done.
Oh, yeah. Where you headed?
No, I'm just home.
Well, I'll take it.
Oh my goodness, no, don't be silly.
No, it's no problem. I'm not mad at you.
No, it's fine. It's
No, I'm
fine.
sorry.
I'm
It's
forced
not-
out away with you. I'm like, I'm like, fine. Yeah.
Well, you don't get bothered on the train?
No, I put in my headphones and I listen to my music and then,
Nice.
yeah, I just go in my own little world and it clears my head. It's nice.
Actually, you know what? That sounds really nice. No, I should probably join you on the train. Clear my head. Get one of those splitters, headphone.
Oh, yeah.
So you're happy here? Everything good? You're
Oh,
happy?
yeah, for sure, yeah. I've been great.
You're comfortable? Everyone treating you right?
Yeah, everybody's been just great. I mean, like, I feel really lucky to be here. So,
Well, I'm really glad you chose it.
Me too.
And, there was, a contingency that were like, they wanted someone older with more experience. It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Only because, yes. I mean, like, I was about to move with my parents and right before so it was safe.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. No, I just want you to know that I really believe in you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from you.
These are cool. Did you,
Oh,
what?
I'm sorry. I have a boyfriend.
No, that's okay. I'm married. I mean, I was just trying to show you how much I appreciate you, I do.
Yeah.
I do, I really do.
I just don't feel comfortable.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. No, that's not my style.
I know. It's fine. So I'm
No,
gonna.
I can see it's not fine. You're not fine. Listen, I want things to be comfortable between us,
No,
okay?
it's okay.
No, I feel it's not. I feel it's not okay. And I really am sorry. I want to make it okay.
Okay.
Okay? Are we good? Nothing happened. Nothing happened, all right? I was showing, you know what it was? I just want to show you how great you are, how good you are.
Thank you.
And that's all, okay? We're good? Friends?
Perfect.
Okay, come on. Let's have a
I don't think
hug.
it's real.
No, let's end this properly. Come on. Come on. Here, this is how we end this properly. All right? Okay? Okay, all right. I'll see you tomorrow.
You are.
If I'm not mistaken, is that David Schwimmer? Yeah, so even Ross can be our harasser. But that's an easy case. Is anybody going to say that that's not harassment? That we can't do something about that? I mean, that's easy. Is it harder if he never kissed her? If he did all those other things and came up and gave her all those compliments and was clearly coming on to her and touching her, maybe not even touching her ears, but commenting on those things, and that's where it ends? What is that then?
But I guess even with that, maybe it's clear that's harassment, but what's not clear is, what does she do next now? I mean, that's the hard position when they're in. Because, okay, now you're still working with this guy, and, you know, when you get the next performance review and it's less than stellar, if you didn't go ahead and report that, and after you get that non-stellar performance review, then you report that. It's like, oh, she made that up. That didn't happen. If it had really happened, why didn't she bring it up right after it occurred? That's when he says, that didn't just happen, you know, that's the signal to her, you better not be reporting this.
I think that we have to take off our litigator hats a little bit and not talk about who's liable, what's the evidence, but how do we create a world where that never happens?
Well, here. We want to know what the experience of the people are in this room. So there's a poll that's going to be up there. Have you been the victim of sexual assault or harassment in the workplace? You take a few minutes just to tell us the answer to that. There's somebody else who's got a comment while we're waiting for the poll to happen. Gary, right behind you.
Just to address, sorry about that. Just the question as to why now and not when Monica Lewinsky was in the news or Anita Hill. I think the biggest factor is the social media that's available for people to come forward and speak, if need be, in the shadows, or to come out and be able to tell their story and be heard by sufficient people where they're not going to be drowned out or intimidated.
I think that's a very accurate observation, that social media provides a degree of equalization of the platform from which to speak in it, and it definitely changes the power dynamics in our culture.
Indeed. I don't know if we're through. I'm seeing most people looking up and not at their phones. So this is as I expected. Most of the people in the room have been the victim of sexual harassment and sexual assault. And is there anybody who is surprised by that? Now I'm going to say something controversial. I'm very confident that the women in this room are not even slightly surprised by that. In fact, they probably suspect that number is too low for the number of people who have experienced sexual harassment and sexual assault. I think there is a gender difference in an understanding of what the reality is between men and women with respect to this. I don't know if I disagree with me or not.
I'd also just point out that the audience has quite a few men in it, so I don't know, this number could reflect 100% of the women saying yes. Not that men can't be harassed, there may be men in the room who said that, but it is interesting. If it's 74% of the people in this room, that could be almost 100% of the women in the room.
Well, I worked for 18 months as the only male in an all-female office. I was not harassed.
Well, the reason why we wanted to ask that question was to sort of set the stage that this is not a hypothetical question, that this is something that we all live with in our profession. At least, not, if we're not living with it currently, we certainly have lived with it in the past. Let's ask the second whole question. And what I want to do, set this up, this next question, and sort of gets to the comment that we're talking about. There is a concept here that the pendulum, over time, was swinging so that women were not believed in particular, but people who claim sexual harassment were not believed. And now that this pendulum has swung more toward perhaps the middle, meaning you're more likely to believe now. And some believe that it maybe it's going too far the other way, and there may be some opinions of people on the panel with respect to that. So let's ask what the audience thinks. Do you think that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction?
Can I can show a film?
Sure, go ahead.
You know, for those of you who are old enough to remember, in the late 50s, there was the McCarthy hearings, where Joe McCarthy accused everybody of being a communist. And of course, it ruined a lot of people's lives. And using what you said, maybe I'm talking from a male perspective, but from my practice, I believe that sexual harassment has almost become a growth industry. And it also may relate to the fact that as a lawyer, I'm thinking of proof and showing this parts of these things. And I don't know how you do it when you spin, you said the pendulum has swung, but maybe that's one of the reasons why lawyers in law firms aren't saying it, because we're thinking of proof and fairness and stuff like that. Not that I'm not condoning sexual harassment by any means. But I think as lawyers, we also have to be concerned with this other aspect. I mean, I'm not saying that all the people who've been accused in the public media of sexual harassment are innocent or anything like that. But I do know that a lot of those people who might be innocent have been ruined because of that. And as I said, I'm getting calls from men who are talking about sexual harassment and all that. And it's become a growth industry, and you say it, and it's there, and it's out there, and it's devastating.
I think that would be a vote for pendulum swung too far. So let's see where we are. No and yes. So the exact opposite of the have you been the victim of sexual harassment?
Well, look, I'll make 2 points about this, and it's no surprise that I would weigh in on this. If you ever got me at a cocktail party conversation going, I would tell you one of the major criticisms that I have of lawyers is that they far too often focus on process rather than substance. And we get sidetracked by making sure that the process is scrupulously fair, almost to the point where we won't make a decision. And what I see it coming out of the Me Too movement is it swinging way far the other way. As the questioner, as the speaker just said, if you mention the word sexual harassment, then down comes the empire, without any opportunity for study or reflection or evaluation of that issue. And don't we live in a country where there's a system? I mean, criminals are innocent until proven guilty. And they must go to a court of law, and evidence must be established they committed the offense before they are punished. We saw quite the opposite with many people who did horrible and offensive things. So again, I'll return to my initial comment. I'm not endorsing sexual harassment. But there are certainly cases where it's not at the extremes, but it's more in the center. And maybe it did happen or maybe it didn't happen. And we have no process, we have condemnation. That as soon as the allegation is made, that person must be guilty because he's a man. And of course, men commit sexual harassment all day, every day. I'll make another point, which is I empathize greatly with the victims of harassment because, if anything, I believe in true meritocracy. If you can do the job, and you can do it as well as anybody else, I don't care if you're male or female, I don't care about your ethnic background, your religious background, I don't care about anything. Work hard, get the right results, that's great, that's all I want. But now we're seeing people who are reporting allegations of sexual harassment dating back 20 and 30 years. And I would raise the point for discussion within this group, which is it really fair to take the moral standards that have evolved and have emerged here in the early 21st century and apply them to conduct that occurred 30 years ago? What does that do for us? Does it really help our discussion about sexual harassment when this morning's headline is that when Linda Blair played Wonder Woman in the late 70s and early 80s on TV, she may have been harassed. She says that she was harassed. I empathize for her and I feel for her, but is that as relevant or important to us as maybe something that happened last week? I would make the argument it may have some incremental value, but I don't know that it really should be the focus of what we're talking about in society today.
Jan, go ahead.
Well, thanks. What a provocative discussion we're having. I really appreciate it. I wasn't planning on going, but it was because of Karen. I'm here, and it has brought up so many thoughts for myself. I really appreciate the comment this lady back here just made, because, you know, what I noticed was that young woman, her first comment was, I'm not comfortable, rather than saying, what the heck, what are you doing? I mean, she should have just, you know, slammed him back. And I would have thought that a woman like me, who's been rather aggressive and a feminist all my life, that I would do the same thing. But I have to tell you, I recently had an experience in a gym where I felt that, my goodness, this fell across the line. And what did I do? I absolutely froze. I froze. I didn't know, I didn't want to be mean. I didn't want to accuse. And I think that's what women do. So I think your relevant comment is so important that women need to speak up. And that is finally today what is happening. And I agree very much with Betsy's comment that it is the climate today, after what happened with Access Hollywood, what women finally felt and marched in January of 16 or 17, that we finally have a voice, and we're now using it. And I just wish I would have used mine when I had that recent experience. And I think that's what needs to be done.
I hope that the first words out of your mouth were not the first words out of that young lady's mouth when she got kissed. Did you catch what she said? Very first words out of her mouth. I'm sorry.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Why was she saying, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend? That goes directly to what Karen was pointing.
Well, and I will tell you that video could literally have been the video of my experience. I said those exact words. I remember distinctly, even though it was many, many years ago. Okay, it was decades ago, and you know what? It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. And the reason why I would talk now, I've never talked about this before, and you notice I'm still not getting enough details that you're ever going to figure out where or who it was. But, you know, I never talked about it until now. And the problem is that in those intervening decades, the odds are very good, as a matter of fact, I know for a fact, that it happened again, and that it could still be happening right now, even though the original bad behavior was 30 years ago. And, you know, you have a sense of guilt somewhat, but she really shouldn't, but you have that survivor's guilt or whatever, that, you know, maybe if I had made a big stink of it and maybe trashed my career back then, I could have stopped somebody else from being hurt. So people are coming forward now, I think in part about older incidents, because they do feel they're going to be more supported and perhaps less retaliated against, and they do want to help other women. So I'm not quite sure when you said, I forget what the word you was, there's a cottage industry in sexual harassment. If you think a bunch of women are getting rich off of this now, or their lawyers are getting rich off of it. But, you know, my main experience with people who complain about bad stuff that happens in the workplace is it very rarely becomes a profitable or pleasant experience for them.
Oh, you wanted to say something as well before.
Well, I was going to make the unpopular statement that I don't think it's swung too far. But for different reasons, I think that we're early in the process. I think that while there are a lot of allegations and there are a lot of people whose careers have been affected by it, it's interesting to see how many allegations have been made against people who haven't lost everything. Aziz Ansari got something, an allegation made against him and many women rallied to his defense. The guy who's in everything.
Ryan Seacrest.
Ryan Seacrest.
Yeah.
Or not, well, him too, and Kelly Skorka. But, you know, so there's, and it's interesting because, and I wonder how much it has to do when you talk about Bill Clinton and how it can ruin him, is because, well, people didn't really want to believe it because they liked him. And so I think it's early to tell how many people are going to be unjustly have their careers derailed. I think that, interestingly, the public, there's been so much of this now, I think the public is actually starting to become a little bit more discerning. And I think that, you know, a lot of times we put our faith in juries as litigators, and I think that we may find that the public is going to end up being pretty fair. People are judging the credibility of the accusations. I don't think we're in a position where we should be saying, you know, people shouldn't be making all these allegations. It's become ridiculous. I don't think it has.
Yeah, I'd actually make the same point, maybe for different reasons. This is probably the most controversial thing I'll say during our time here. I actually don't think that it's pendulum swung too far the other way. And I'm not particularly concerned if there are some fellas whose careers are challenged because of this, because I think it's the only way it stops.
Well, let me ask you a question. Coming out of our original meeting, the comment I remember you making then was, you weren't overly concerned if there was a couple of people who went down inappropriately, who had false allegations that stuck.
Yes, I did say that, and I'm sure I would care about it if it was me or somebody I loved. But from a very broad perspective, from that 50,000 foot looking down at our culture and our profession generally, I am not, those are not the people I'm worried about in this. What I'm worried about are the people who have experienced this for 2,000 years. And I don't think it changes unless the Me Too movement gets even bigger than it already is.
But shouldn't we care about both? Shouldn't we care both about the people who have experienced wrongful conduct and people who are falsely accused of engaging in that wrongful conduct?
Yeah.
It's not a binary proposition. We should care about both.
I agree with you. I just want to put the emphasis on the former and not the latter. But
and I'd like to address that exact point to Daryl about process versus conclusion. As an investigator who investigates a lot of sexual harassment complaints, that's mainly what I do in work and school settings. Most of my clients are very concerned about due process. They want to make sure the accused has every opportunity to respond. That's why they hire an outside investigator. And also having worked in doing, and discrimination is always a hidden activity. It's very hidden when it's sexual in nature. It usually is only one or just the two people involved are there. It's not going to be something that others know about, and it can be a he said, she said. But in every trial that I've done, it's always he said, she said, she said, she said, she said, and every jury is always worried about false accusations. It's just not the support to say there are false accusations. There are so many redundancies in terms of the exact MO is repeated over and over and over. That has been my experience in my 36 years of doing this work. And one trial I did in 1999 in the Northern District of Ohio involved over 30 women against one housing provider. And we did not, the accusations went back over 25 years. We only concentrated though on the last 3 years. We did not put anybody on who had been harassed. And even in the middle, the third week of the trial, a woman called the police on this guy who was on trial. And I just think it is so hidden, it is so out there, and I don't think it gets reported in law firms because it's a hierarchical structure, If you want to have your career ruined, you make an accusation. I don't think law firms are any different than every other workplace.
Well, forgive me for speaking for you, Daryl, but I would predict that your concern is not whether the individuals will be given due process in civil or criminal litigation, but the public's view of trying a person via remedials.
Well, I mean, I have no qualms with something that's investigated and documented and gone to trial. I respect those results. What concerns me is the ones that never get there. Because the allegations of wrongdoing are so serious, perhaps justifiably, it never gets there because Steve Witt steps down before the board of directors can even conduct an internal investigation. Harvey Weinstein resigns from the studio. Again, I recognize the allegations go from not just sexual harassment to outright assault and otherwise, but it concerns me that if there's a groundswell of support, something happens in 24, 48, or 72 hours. It's the rush to judgment that leaves my antenna tingling and saying, we should be worried about that. We should be worried about anything in society that is a polar extreme. The extremes are never good. Life is really good down the middle of the road.
Well, and I think part of that speaks to social media versus reputable newspapers. Because I think the reputable newspapers, at least to the best of my knowledge, when they have reported these things, have really done extensive investigations and gotten more than just one person's viewpoint on it. And so I do think that what you're talking about is reflective kind of a general societal issue that we now no longer have a filter of people with ethical journalistic standards who filter through this, that it's just all out there for everyone to see. And maybe that's part of your feeling about this rush to judgment.
Well, part of it goes back to something that our board has been educated about in recent months, and that is that the standard of journalism used to be 2 independent sources, and nothing goes to press until it's been vetted by multiple layers of editors. Now that there's this concept of iterative journalism, and the reporter will tweet out, here's the story I'm working on this morning. And then at 9 o'clock, the first draft of the story will go up. And then a new one will go up at 9:30, and then one will go up at 10. And maybe you see the story at 9 that substantially changes by the 4 o'clock edition, but people don't see that and don't read that. So,
do you have an example of that from a reputable newspaper with a sexual harassment claim?
I don't have a specific example. I'm just talking about the general dynamic that has changed in journalism. And you see it right here with the plain dealer. That the stories go up and the stories evolve and change as the day goes on, as the reporter is working on his or her story.
Did you have something? I did. So I do understand the position that has this gone too far, because I think there's an argument that perhaps it has. But I voted that it has not gone too far for the reasons that Karen mentioned. If we ignore what happened in the past, we'll never fix it going into the future. And if you think about that clip that we just saw, how manipulative that was. He started out by saying, we wanted other people for the job. I voted for you. It's paying a lot of money. She's, thank you, I don't have to live with my parents now. He basically was setting the stage for a very quiet sexual harassment that would not be reported because she had a career she was trying to launch. She had bills she needed to pay. And so if we ignore what happened in the past, we can't stop it for the future, and we need to have a sea change so that young women and young men can come forward and say, this happened to me, and my career shouldn't be ruined because of it.
So, from your point and Karen's point and most people's point, I think everybody would agree that we shouldn't have sexual harassment in law firms or anywhere else, and that women should be comfortable to be in a workspace, that they should be able to feel that they're making advancements based on their merits and not something else. And the question that I think about almost every day now, especially at our firm as we're trying to navigate these waters, is how do we get there? Are we going to get there in a very coercive way that is modeled on, we're going to police you and punish you, and is that going to be effective? I mean, it's very satisfying from a retribution point of view, but I think if our goal is to actually have our daughters and sisters and wives feel comfortable, I still struggle with how are we going to achieve that? How are we going to make it so that, as Karen said, she's not in that situation? And, you know, coming from from the point of view of an old white guy who's been in these situations, I wonder about how my contemporaries react to these kinds of things. And how are we going to get to the point where they're supportive of initiatives to achieve this? And I think that there's, you get kind of two different reactions. One is a very defensive reaction. You're accusing me, you're tarring me with what other people have done. And I think a much smaller group now are looking at these things and trying to be reflective and saying, okay, when we think about the last 30 years, how many situations have I been in where I didn't get it, I didn't understand it, but maybe it was coercive. Maybe I was not understanding how everybody else was thinking. And so my concern from the industry's point of view is how do we make it so that when people are in those situations, there's a real understanding of what somebody else is thinking and feeling and perceiving, as opposed to what you're thinking and intending and perceiving. And I come back to, we've got to do a lot of educating. And we've got to do a lot of talking to people when they're young. I hope that kind of education starts before you start your first day of the law firm. Those kinds of things have to be happening in people's homes. You have to be teaching your sons about respecting women and things like that. But until we can get to that point, I'm not sure how we ever eradicate this.
It's a good point, and one of the things that we wanted to throw out to everybody, and certainly want to hear from members of the audience. How can the CMBA be one of the places where we talk about this, where we try to figure out ways to change it for the future? So please feel free to also give us suggestions about how the CMBA can play a role in that. And Thought Leadership Committee can help work that change.
Can I suggest one thing that a friend of mine who's a professor at Yale, his name's Ian Ayers, and he's developed a software, and it's starting to be used in various entities like colleges, where it's like an escrow of sexual harassment complaints. It's kind of like, if any of you are familiar, I don't know if this still says, there's an adoption registry, where if you have given a child up for adoption, and you were an adoptee, like you could both go to the registry that you wanted to meet each other and they would match you. And so it's the same sort of idea for sexual harassment complaints, that if you are a woman and you're afraid to come forward with a complaint, that you could file the complaint and kind of goes into this escrow, and then if other people file and there are matches for the harasser, then you would each be contacted and told, okay, there are other people who had the same thing happen. Do you want to have your name released? Do you want us now to investigate this? Because I know back, I used to be in HR, and I also used to do in-house employment law, and so many times you have women come to you and say, this bad thing happened, this harassment, please don't do anything about it. And of course, I always had to say, if you tell me about it, I've got to do something about it. And so this would be kind of a method where people could, and I'm told that it's producing results, that there's one recently where they got like 10 matches on the same person within the period of a year or two. And so then the women felt like they were going to be supported, there were going to be other people to back them up, and they felt comfortable moving forward with an investigation. So that's, maybe that would be one thing that there could be, because I think going against the law firm is particularly intimidating, and maybe if there were a confidential repository.
I knew you'd want to speak to that here.
I think it's an interesting concept. I don't know anything about it in its particular application. How long does the embargo exist? Is it really relevant if you complained about something that somebody did 15 years ago, and then there's another incident, 15 years later? Does that make the two incidents probative?
Well, it's up to the women to decide. It's basically a way for women who are afraid, of going forward to know, okay, I wasn't the only one this happened to, and they would make that decision. Was it probative? I mean, I don't know, you have to work out the details on time and is there a lapse, but it's just kind of that concept of letting you know that other people had the same thing happen to them.
Well, one of the things that goes to is, and make no, I don't want to suggest that I don't do this every week on behalf of a client, is prepare a non-disclosure agreement or a settlement agreement which contains a confidentiality clause where the person isn't going to speak about the allegations anymore. And I know that works both ways, both in terms of making bad actors get to hide behind them, but they also maybe help accusers to feel comfortable proceeding because then they don't have to maybe because of the rest of their career. So I think it does go both ways, but I do think we have to be worried about how these sorts of things get out in the community and in the profession.
Your clients have a much harder choice to make now since December of 2017 with respect to confidentiality.
That's true.
If you don't know, there's a provision of the tax law that says if you settle a case involving allegations of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, that there's a disqualification for any deduction under the Internal Revenue Code if it's confidential. It's 162Q. So now the issue is, because of course Congress acted arguably too quickly in the wake of the Me Too movement, the particular language that is in there, it has been suggested not only does it disallow a deduction for the employer who's paying a confidential settlement, it may disallow an above-the-line deduction for the victim who settles. They get taxed not just on the net portion that they receive, but on the gross portion, because there's a disallowance of the above-the-line deduction for attorney's fees.
And you thought you were going to come here and not bring something very specific.
You can now claim 1 minute of CLE.
So do we have other ideas about how we can do a better job as the Thought Leadership Committee and the CMBA more generally to help us through this? Education is one back there, Karen?
Thank you. One thing that I would suggest, and I'm getting a lot of looks here, but one thing I would suggest is that the emotion involved, while recognizably intense for a person who has been a victim, somehow has to be taken out of the process. I will relate a personal story that just happened to me recently. A friend of mine who I went to law school with, who was a victim of rape some number of years ago and who is very sensitive to sexual harassment, in the social media platform basically let her heart out about a situation that she thought she was sexually harassed in. I simply made a comment on the thread saying much what like Daryl said, I'm not condoning, I'm not supporting, I'm not doing any of this, and I recognize your feelings and trying to place myself in a position where my question would come a little bit across more neutral. I asked, what is the definition of sexual harassment? Obviously, in some of the questions, there's gender differences. My question was geared towards, okay, so some jerk tells you an off-color joke. Is that sexual harassment? Was he really trying to get into your pants or force you to do something against your will, or was he just being a jerk? The response that I got on that thread I felt I was harassed. People came out of the woodwork attacking me, misrepresenting what I had actually stated, and made it the issue me asking a question. How dare I? If we want this type of stuff in the legal community, you're going to have some type of safeguard against the emotional outlet. And I get that there's an emotional outlet. I get the victim is finally getting a chance to have their voice. But when that comes across in such a strong emotive tone, you're going to have backlash. And I hate to see the backlash take away from the positives of this type of communication.
Well, the internet is not always the best place for reasoned discourse.
I find that true.
It's not. But I think your point is well taken, that these are hard issues that often involve an examination of hard questions. But they are so emotionally laden that sometimes the person who asks the hard question all of a sudden becomes the son of a bitch, who's got the temerity to ask that question. But it's a valid question. There isn't just one be-all self-evident definition of sexual harassment. It involves human behavior, which comes in so many forms and so many differences, and the subtleties matter. And I think that's a fair question to ask.
In the professionalism,
Thank you.
in the professionalism aspects of our CLEs, I don't think I've ever seen a course in sexual harassment. Yes, does anybody ever seen one? I don't know why if you ask me what the Bar Association to do, that should be part of the curriculum.
Well, there was a proposal recently at the ABA to adopt an amendment to one of the provisions in Rule 8 that would have outlawed discriminatory behavior in the practice of law.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that there was a consideration, which I've heard, of having sexual harassment training be part of what you can do for CLE.
That's what I was.
Meaning not generally what is the law of sexual harassment and what you counsel your clients to do, not that, but training with respect to sexual harassment in the profession being eligible for CLE.
We do it for alcoholism all the time until we're getting sick of it.
So to make you try to drink.
Other ideas or just general comments? We don't want to foreclose the audience from participating or panel members by all means.
Well, I wanted to thank this panel because I think this is exactly what the bar should be doing. So thank each of you and thank you for asking hard questions.
Thank you.
I would like to say for the record that I do not support sexual harassment. That to be clear.
Are you feeling a little defensive over there? I think we got it.
All of Gainesville hasn't done any training.
Listen, clearly, I agree with Diane. I think this is one of the ways in which the bar is really working at its best, is when we take on these difficult issues with very complicated, sort of obvious, but also subtle issues, and have an opportunity for conversation. So I actually thank all four of you for being so brave and so candid in your remarks and for daring not only to take the stage, but to actually speak. So thank you, Karen, Tom, Betsy, and Daryl for being here. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back the second Tuesday of April, and our topic is
legal community's role in preparing for civil unrest.
That's right, the legal community's role in preparing for civil unrest. The Bar Association's been involved in a program called, or an initiative called the Community Trust Program. We're going to hear the Columbus Bar Association is coming and sending some folks who will talk about what they're doing, and we're looking for some potential application in Cleveland. So let's keep the conversation going. You saw June 6th, we're going to have a continuation of the sexual harassment conversation here at the bar. Lots of opportunities and ways to engage. Keep coming back to the bar. Thank you.